So I get to the front of these rows of beings, and the one on the left in front steps forward, and he didn't have a face. It was like black energy that was moving very fast, but it wasn't scary looking. It felt normal to me. And he's saying, "It's not your time, you must go back." And I said, "But I can't go back. I've found what I've been looking for my whole life." And he said, "But it's not your time. You cannot stay. You have a child. You must go back." And I said, "You can't send me back to go back into all that pain and confusion and worry and not knowing."
I would love to have you share your near-death experience story with us.
I'd be happy to. My story began a couple of years after your story. I was in my early 30s, and I had had an accident many years before, almost 10 years before, in Mexico with my husband. We'd gone swimming, and there was great undertow, and I was not that savvy about that particular body of water and what was going on. But I decided to get out, which I did. And as I walked out of the water, a wave hit me from behind and kind of knocked me down and pulled me forward at the same time as the water was receding back in. And my foot had gotten stuck into the sand when the wave hit me. And so when it pulled me, I dislocated my knee, tore cartilage, ligaments, the whole bit, had a blood clot. And I was drowning because all I could do was hold on to my leg. I couldn't right myself in the water. Well, luckily, my husband was a really good swimmer. He had played water polo for many years in Italy. And so he grabbed me up and got me out. And that was kind of like a shocking experience for me because I felt in that moment I was in real peril and could die. And I had really come up against that before in my life. Well, our friends who we were there visiting in Acapulco took me to their chiropractor. What I didn't know he was going to do was flip my foot and ankle to put my knee back into place. And when he did, he did a lot of damage. And I was in so much pain, I passed out. Well, at that time, they didn't really have arthroscopy as a way of fixing things. They would do the major patella surgery. And I was still working as a model and didn't want to have a big, long scar because of my work. And so I opted to wait. And I waited 10 years, probably too long. But when I finally went in for surgery, there was sort of a knowing of something, how we get those feelings and experiences. And I was waiting on the gurney outside of the operating room the morning of surgery. And I just remember freezing. I was just freezing. And I think it was anticipation because I did have awarenesses even then before my incident, but I didn't have the cognitive connection to what the feelings were. So I was just racking with cold, almost to the point where I was shaking. I go into somatic release very easily, and I was doing that on the gurney. And one of the surgical nurses came out and she saw I was in distress, and she said, "Let me get you a warm blanket." And I thought, oh, this would be great. So she got me that, and that started to help calm my body. And at that point, they're wheeling me in, and they put another one on my body because I had low blood pressure to begin with, and my body temperature usually fluctuates on the low side along with it. So they put the second blanket on. And at that point, I went out like a light. And that was before my anesthesia, which is interesting. Yeah. And as a child, I spent a great deal of time going out of my body because of trauma. So I think that's kind of what I did. So I awakened in recovery, and I'm kind of like grappling with where I am and all of that. And I'm hearing this commotion in the bed next to me. And I'm trying not to pay attention because I don't want to know. And I'm trying to figure out where I am. And they're calling this person by name. And her name is Dianne, same as me. And I thought, that's weird. What are the odds of that? And then I went back to my own experience. And a few minutes later, I hear the doctor saying, Dianne Sherman, wake up. Dianne Sherman, wake up. And I said, wait a minute. That's me. That's me. They've got the wrong person. Oh my God, did they do the wrong surgery? What's going on? Blah, blah, blah. And so I'm kind of waving my hand saying, hey, that's me. I'm here and I'm fine. But they're not paying any attention to me. And I don't think anything of it. I'm kind of in that mindset of, well, they're busy trying to do whatever this person needs. The next thing I know, I am now standing at the bottom of her bed, looking up at her, and I see that it's me. And instead of having sort of an overwhelming feeling about, oh my, what's happening kind of thing, there was just this calm and this peacefulness about, it was almost like somebody said, please pass the salt. It was neutral. The feeling was neutral. I didn't feel connected to her. I didn't feel anything for her. I was here being me, and I could look down and see myself being me and yet see her. So I was still in physical form in my awareness at that point, but I was disconnected from her. The next thing I knew, I was brought up to the corner of the ceiling, now overlooking recovery room and all that they're doing. And as I'm watching, I'm feeling this extrication. I'm being pulled out of the room altogether. And the next realization is I'm now moving forward into absolute blackness. And as a kid, I was terrified of the dark because that's when the trauma came. So I thought, if I can just find a little glimmer of light out there someplace, somewhere, a glimmer of light, I will be okay. Because first of all, I'll know I'm not blind, which was a fear of mine as a child, not seeing the trauma coming, not being able to defend myself, and that all would be well as long as there's light. There was a thing about light always in my life, getting to the light, whatever that meant to me as a child. So as I'm being pushed forward and I can feel my body resisting as I'm being pushed forward into this blackness, I'm just staring and staring and staring, looking for this glimmer of light. And I finally find it and I'm just like fixated on it. And I don't deviate my vision at all because I know as long as I can connect to that, I'm going to be safe. And it started to grow and I started to get closer to it and it grew more and I got closer to it. And all of a sudden the light was all around me. And my body just could relax and be at peace. And as I'm moving further into this light and I'm looking at it and it's white, but it's not a color we have on Earth. It's not in the earthly spectrum of color because there's a brilliance to it and there's a luminosity to it. And I don't even have words to describe it. It's just otherworldly is what it is. And as it's surrounding me and I'm feeling the sensible rightness and well-being, I'm moving. And then all of a sudden the white is parting like clouds. It's parting. And I'm floating, literally. It almost sounded like something out of a silly movie. I'm floating through it. And as I get to the end of it, as it's moving back and I'm moving forward, there are 2 rows of beings in front of me, and they look like monks. They're in the brown robes with the hoods up, and their energy was just very gentle and kind, which growing up in the Catholic religion, the monks were probably the less severe part of the religion. They were the kinder, gentler souls, it seemed like to me as a kid growing up. And so that's why I think I had that vision. I think we always get something that's analogous to us, so it doesn't feel foreign or scary. So I'm floating between them and I'm feeling this love just surrounding me from them. It's like they're just vibrating love to me. And I'm feeling feelings I've never had before. I'm feeling cherished. I had never felt cherished. I had never felt loved unconditionally. I had never felt safe on a level that I was feeling it And I felt like I was coming home, which was something I had wanted my whole life, was that sense of rightness within me and connection and all of that. And even though I had been married, had a child, I still had never felt that. So I get to the front of these rows of beings, and the one on the left in front steps forward and he speaks to me. And I say he because he had all those wonderful masculine qualities and made me feel safe, loved. And he was in charge, taking care. He just was supportive and there for me and wise and just an amazing feeling. And he looked at me, and when I say look, he didn't have a face. None of the monks had faces. It was like black energy that was moving very fast, but it wasn't scary looking. It felt normal to me. It felt like that was, of course, they look like that. And he's speaking inside of me, not verbally out loud, but I can hear him inside of me. And he's saying, it's not your time, you must go back. And I said, but I can't go back. I've found what I've been looking for my whole life. And he said, but it's not your time. You cannot stay. You have a child. You must go back. And I said, you can't send me back through all of that to give up this, to go back into all that pain and confusion and worry and not knowing. I said, you can't send me back. He said, you have a child. It's not your time. You must go back. And I started thinking about my daughter, who was 6 years old at the time. And I thought, who would care for her if I stayed? Now, her dad was my ex-husband for a reason. My sister was not emotionally grounded enough to be a parent for her. My parents were both dead. There was nobody in my world that could love her the way I wanted her to be loved. And in that moment that I was thinking about her, back in my body. And I woke up in my hospital room and dazed and not knowing what had happened, because at that time there was no open discussion of near-death experience. Raymond Moody's book, I think, had only been out a couple of years. We didn't have internet or anything like that, where the information would get taken around and you become aware of things like this. It was a whole new thing to talk about. So I had to find a way to understand what had happened. Now, the lady who I was sharing the room with, she'd had the similar surgery, not as complicated as mine. And she was in tremendous pain and on a lot of medication. And they had me up walking that night with no medication. And the doctor said he had never seen anybody heal as fast as I was healing. So it was an amazing experience. It took me a long time to figure out what had happened.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us, Dianne. Now, you said, we'll back up just a little bit. You said that you were raised as a Catholic. So I'm curious how your experience affected your religious views.
Well, interestingly enough, I think the first major thing that happened to me is that I walked away from the Catholic Church, because I realized that everything that I had been raised with, everything that I had been taught, was not true. It's a religion that's based in fear. And being on the other side, the thing that I loved the most was the realization that there is nothing to be afraid of, because there's no judgment. There is no hell. It's only unconditional love. And there's nothing to be afraid of. And in the Catholic religion, in the era that I grew up in it, in the 50s and 60s, it was scary and it was threatening, because it was pretty fundamental at that point. You were responsible for not only your outcome, but everybody else's outcome around you that you touched, especially as teenagers growing up and all that kind of stuff. Girls were responsible for boys' reactions to them and all that. Yes. It was an unfair, unfounded, ungrounded religion. And I had to walk away. And I had always been very pious as a kid, which is a weird word to use for me, but that's how I felt. I felt very connected to the saints. I read Lives of the Saints and all that stuff. It felt very analogous to me. So, yeah, it was quite an awakening.
So, in my experience that I had when I was 18 or 19, my spiritually transformative experience, that was the overwhelming revelation to me as well that there is nothing to be afraid of. There's no reason to feel guilty or ashamed or afraid. Everything is perfect. Now, trying to communicate that with people, it can be difficult. One of the biggest questions that I will get is people asking me, well, aren't there consequences for actions? And if there's nothing to be afraid of and nothing to feel guilty about, now, you didn't say that, but that was my experience, then can we just live however we want? So what would you say in response to that question?
I would say, of course, you can live any way you want to. You're in a free will state. That was one of the gifts we were given as humans on the planet. But when you die, you have a life review. And in your life review, there's not a tribunal that's sitting there judging everything you did. You get to judge yourself. You get to feel what everybody else felt who was interacting with you at the time of the interactions. And you get to judge, was that the best version of me? Was that the way I wanted to show up? Was that what all I could do? Did I have a choice? Would I make a different choice if I had it? So you become aware of your own foibles, your own mistakes, your own slips, whatever it was. And that's where compassion, love, and understanding comes in also. We are all doing the best we know how with the tools we've got and the gifts that we've got. And we have to give ourselves a break. It doesn't mean you can go out and be a horrifically bad human being to other people. No. And you shouldn't even be that to yourself. But there isn't anything that's stopping you except you.
You mentioned in another interview that I was just listening to this morning, I believe it was when you were in the light, you had this experience of ultimate knowledge and you felt that everything was within your consciousness and you understood the reasons for everything. I'm just wondering if you remember any of that. Like, what is the purpose of life and what is it all about?
I didn't come back with all the information. A lot of that was kind of sealed off when I came back into my body. But it was the awareness that we can at times tap into that, the universal consciousness, and that all of the knowledge and wisdom is ours to connect with if we so choose. I think the reason we're here is to love and be loved, to create, to explore and be curious. I think we are an extent. Now, the Catholic Church, the thinking is you are made in the image and likeness of God. Okay. In my experience, it's we are a direct connection from God. In other words, everything we experience, God experiences. And I think God wanted to know it's God's self in all ways. And we provide that. So it's a journey. And one of the things that I learned is that heaven is here. It's not there. That's going home and that's wonderful and that it is the best, but we can't create heaven here. We can also create hell here, and we do. It's a choice. I think that's the biggest heartache I have is when I see people in such struggle, in such pain, and I can see past the facade of who they are and know that that's coming from their own internal machinations emotionally, and that they can make some changes to that if they were aware of it.
Well, along those lines, you said that in your experience, you felt that connection that you had been looking for your entire life, and you described it as feeling at home with yourself. So what would you say that connection is? Is it God? Is it us? What is it that we're looking for?
Well, I think the realization for me is that I felt lost and alone.
Mhm.
And when I was on the other side, I realized that was a lie. I wasn't lost and alone, that spirit was with me all the time, but I couldn't feel it. I couldn't understand it. I couldn't communicate with that. And since my near death experience, I know that spirit's got my back 24/7. I'm not alone. There are times when I feel lonely. There are times when I feel abandoned because of my childhood stuff. Those things will come up, be triggered by interactions, and I'll feel it. But it's my job to remind myself that I'm not alone. I'm in direct connection with Source all the time. Growing up Catholic, you were taught that you weren't good enough, holy enough, whatever, to have that connection, that you had to go through a sanctified person who was a priest.
Mhm.
And I realized that was just their belief system. It's not the truth of how it works. We don't need anybody to have hard connection and have hard communication. I talk to God all day long. I don't need somebody. I don't need a place. I don't have to go to a group in order to access that.
That's beautiful. What do you think is the best way for people to access that?
Well, I think for me, meditation has always been a door to quiet my monkey mind, quiet my ego mind, quiet down so that I can be in those feelings within me that are connected to all that is. Everybody has their own way of doing it. For some people, meditation's too still and they're trying to be quiet, and your head's never going to be quiet. I don't hear the dialogue so much anymore in my head because I've worked really hard on that. But what I find recently is that when I tune into what my brain is chattering about, it's singing songs. It's picking up songs that I've heard during the day or weeks ago or from another time in my life, and it's playing those songs. But whatever keeps it busy and out of my way, I'm happy. I don't care.
You mentioned something in another interview that I was listening to about soul groups. Do you believe that we come here with people that we've agreed that we have a contract with?
I do. I believe that the soul groups get together before incarnation, before everybody's incarnations, and talk about what they're individually working on and how they are supporting each other and what roles they'll be willing to play. And that was a biggie for me because, as I've mentioned, a lot of trauma in childhood, and my dad was the scariest of individuals for me. And I realized when I understood the soul group aspect of our creation that he was willing to be the bad guy so that I could have certain experiences and get certain knowledge and wisdom from that. He was my teacher in a lot of ways. And there was so much love for me that he was willing to be the bad guy on the big screen, not on our little screen. On our little screen, I don't think he had a clue as to what was going on. He was just knee jerking through his life.
Yeah, I've heard several people say that when they had near-death experiences, they discovered that the person who caused them so much trauma had agreed to do that because they asked them to. And so when I heard this, it really brought me so much comfort. First of all, because I think one of the hardest things about life is loneliness because we're feeling cut off from our source. And so then I started looking at the relationships in my life and thinking, this person, I've probably known them from eternity, and our relationship far supersedes what we know here. And even the people who have been difficult for me, like we have a love that I may not be connected to here. And it was so comforting to me.
It certainly helped me in the process of forgiving him for the dance that he did with me, and also thanking him because of the work I ended up doing. If I hadn't had that experience with my dad, I would not be able to understand or support people who have gone through trauma. I can hold the space for anybody, no matter what their trauma is, because I've been through most of it. And so I can appreciate and just be steady with it. Nothing shocks me anymore. So it was good training. One of the things that I appreciate too is it allowed me and still allows me to appreciate what other people feel. I'll see somebody in line at the market who's kind of being rough on the person who's checking out her groceries or his groceries. And I have to remind myself that they are hurting. They are coming from some kind of pain and suffering, or they wouldn't be showing themselves in the way that they are, and to have compassion and understanding for them. Even if they're rude and nasty to me, it has nothing to do with me. It's all theirs. But I can appreciate how they got there. Most of the time when people are acting out with us or saying things to us that aren't welcome, it really has nothing to do with us. It reminds me of, I don't know, you're probably too young to, they probably stopped playing this game when you were a kid, but it was called the hot potato game. And you had to keep passing the hot potato. And that's what people do with their pain. They just want to give it away. They can't hold on to it. They can't handle it. They just want to give it away. So that's how they get relief.
Well, I'm going to read a quote of yours that I love for my viewers to hear that I thought was beautiful. You said, "Life is magnificent. It wasn't what I thought it was. There's a different way to experience it and a different mindset to have about it." So would you like to talk about that, and what is the different way to experience it and the different mindset to have?
Well, it comes back to choice. We have a choice as to how we show up. We have a choice as to what we choose to experience. I am always looking for the magic. I'm a firm believer in it. I was as a child. And I think that has been my saving grace my whole life, is that I know that there's wonder and magic everywhere. So I'm looking for it. So I don't want to miss it. I want to make sure I'm wise-eyed open and my heart's open and it can show up, and I'm calling it in all the time. It's kind of like on a simplistic level, parking karma. I always get not only a good parking place, but I get the best parking place for whatever it is I'm going to be doing. If I'm in a mall or whatever, I get the one that's closest to the shop I'm going to be in, closest to the door of the shop. It's easiest to access for me. And I have that because I've always trusted it would be there. I trusted that even when I drive in and there's nothing, I will listen. I'm always in contact. So I'm listening for direction to turn right or turn left or just go around one more time. Whatever it is that Spirit's going to feed me, I just use that process, and I don't have any energy on it because I know I am taken care of. So I'm receiving graciously all the time. And because of that attitude and mindset, which was not what I had before my near death, let me tell you, I was the consummate victim. My life has been pretty amazing in so many ways. I've had divine experiences. Nothing is as divine as my near-death experience, but I've had magical, wonderful things happen. I've been privy to things that other people haven't. It's been an amazing ride.
Wow.
And I think we set that up for ourselves. I remember Abraham. I don't know if you're familiar with Abraham. Years ago, I heard Abraham saying something about set up your day the way you want it. So when I would wake up in the morning, I would say, I wonder what amazing people I get to work with today. I wonder what amazing experiences I'm going to have. I wonder how much fun that drive's going to be that I'm going to take later in the day. Whatever it is, I put my energy out there for it, trusting it'll be received well. Because I read a book many, many years ago about this wonderful woman who was a doctor who went to Australia for some award thing that she was being given. That she'd been working with the Aborigines and they were awarding her something. And she realized that she ended up doing a walkabout with a tribe. Not intentionally, but she ended up doing a walkabout for many, many, many months. All of her clothes were taken away, her credit cards, her shoes, her this or that, everything was gone. She was on her own with them. And she learned watching them every morning. They would wake up just as the sun was rising and they would give thanks for the food, for the lodging, for the care, or whatever it was that they were wanting in their day. They were giving thanks for all those things long before they showed up. And that resonated with me. And I just thought, that's it. We have to practice that. Give gratitude before you have something to be grateful for. Just be in gratitude for anything and everything that is coming your way. And it just facilitates it coming.
That is so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Dianne. I would like to ask you about your experience integrating your near-death experience. You said that was quite a process. And I also know that you came back with gifts that you now use to help people. So would you like to talk about that?
The process of understanding what happened to me was kind of a rocky road. I didn't know if I was losing my mind, and I was terrified to talk to my priest. I would have been a heretic. If I'd talked to my doctor, he probably would have thought I needed to be committed, because at that point I was then hearing voices. I was sensing when I would go into a restaurant, I could feel everybody's feelings and emotions. And it was this wave of information coming to me as I'd walk into a restaurant, and I didn't know where it was coming from or how to shut it off. And I could feel the woman next to me who was hurting and upset. And so now my whole body's reacting to everything that I'm picking up from everybody else. And I thought I was losing my mind. How could I hear all these voices and feel all these feelings? What the hell is happening to me? And I kept asking for guidance. And Spirit sent me to people who started to talk to me on a level that I had never had conversation before. It was a depth of understanding and wisdom about spirit, not religion, but spirit and our connection and what we could do and this, that, and the other. And it was mostly women that I was sent to. I had one man that was quite supportive in his early information for me, who was an astrologer. And they helped me right myself. They helped me know that I wasn't losing my mind, because that's really what I felt. I came from craziness in my family, and I thought, okay, now I'm going crazy. I was the only grounded one in a family of crazy. And I thought, okay, I'm losing my mind. And then after being with these women and talking to them and sharing, and they said, oh, you had your death experience. And I thought, what? And little by little, I learned with one of these ladies to meditate. And we would explore things. We would explore crystals and whatnot and their information and, how they could support us. And it was the beginning of all of that stuff for me. And I had my near death in 81. It was a journey. And once the door was open, I couldn't get enough of it. I wanted to talk to anybody and everybody that I could. And I had some wonderful out-of-body experiences and journeys and this and that and the other. I ended up going to some of the sacred sites around the world, crop circles and whatnot, and just having a fabulous time exploring all of this and understanding that it's here for everybody. It's not just for me. And I think one of the most important things for me is helping people feel better, be on a different level with themselves, because I want more people to play with. People are so stuck in pain and suffering and fear, and there's no fun in that. So I love seeing people happy and thriving and moving forward. I just got an email yesterday from a client who just published his book. He finally felt it was time and had the information and trusted himself enough and just did it. And it's lovely to be a part of anybody's journey that's a good one. It's a blessing. So coming back, it was having the psychic abilities, the clairs, yeah, clairaudience, clairsentience, clairvoyance, and as my guides called it, clear sight, which is the ability to see past the facade. I see what's going on underneath emotionally with people and psychologically. And I mirror back to them the things that they haven't been able to get in touch with, to work with. So many of us, because of traumas, shut down. And we don't realize how precious we are and what a gift we are to the world and how much our part helps to complete the puzzle. We're all connected to this matrix and we all have to plug into it and be our part. And our presence gives people permission to be themselves if we do it in the right way. And I just want to support because that uplifts me.
Is there anything you'd like to share about how people can get in touch with you?
Love to. Thank you. Yes, I have a website, guidingyourspirit.com. The website describes the work that I do and how I work with people and the feedback that I've gotten from people. I've been doing this a long time and it just keeps getting better because as being on the path, our depth just keeps growing. So our abilities keep growing, which is pretty awesome. I will be 75 this year and I never thought I would feel the way I feel. I've never felt stronger. I've never felt more secure or grounded. My body's not as secure as my awarenesses are, but it's hanging in there and life is good. And I made the decision a long time ago with another spiritual friend that I would only process through joy, not through pain. I'd had enough of processing through pain. So I do a lot of laughing in processing. And as long as I keep loving and nurturing me, it allows me to love and nurture others. The judgment that we have comes from the fact that we're judging the hell out of ourselves. And when we stop that, when we start having appreciation for who we are, where we've been, how we got to where we are, and to love ourselves for it, it opens everything else up. It makes it so much easier to love and appreciate each other. Somebody that I know said to me, "Your house is so uncluttered." And I said, "I don't collect stuff. Stuff is not my thing because of how sensitive I am vibrationally. Less is more, and I have to live like that." I said, "What I collect are hearts. It's the connection to people that is what thrills me. It's not what I have in physical form. I don't care about that."
I love so much of what you said there about processing through joy instead of pain and about collecting hearts instead of stuff. And wow, there's just so much wisdom there.
Thank you.
I will link Dianne's website in the description, so be sure to check that out. Dianne, are there any final words that you would like to say?
I think it's really important for us to learn to trust ourselves because nobody knows better for us than us. And as I teach my clients that it's really important to work with your heart and your solar plexus. That's your GPS. It will answer your questions. It will take you in the direction you need to go. Always check in with your heart and intuition. Step out of your monkey mind. It's not there to support you. Use it to do work, but don't rely on it for answers when it comes to you. It's not some wise guru up there. It's a computer loop. Heart and intuition will never lie. That's why we muscle test, because the body doesn't lie. This does, because it runs on fear. So listen to yourself, trust yourself, and have fun with yourself because you deserve it. You're all precious.
Thank you so much, Dianne. Thank you for joining us, for sharing your story and your wisdom with us.
Thank you for having me. This has been so lovely for me.
Thank you for watching the Love Covered Life podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and comment with your thoughts and opinions, and check the description box for the links to my free community where I share lots of resources, my Pay What You Can community where we do classes and challenges together, my TikTok, Instagram, my Clips channel, and lovecoveredlife.com where I share my paintings. Thank you so much for your support.